The rain drummed against the concrete walls of the military training facility as Sarah Chen adjusted her rifle scope for the 100th time that morning. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely 110 pounds, she looked more like a college student than a potential Navy SEAL candidate. The other recruits towered over her during formation, their broad shoulders and muscled frames casting shadows that seemed to swallow her whole. "Chen, you sure you're in the right place?" called out Instructor Rodriguez from across the shooting range. His voice carried the kind of authority that made even the toughest recruits straighten their spines. "The administrative office is down the hall if you're looking for a desk job." Scattered laughter echoed from the other candidates. Sarah kept her eyes fixed on the target 600 yards downrange, her breathing steady despite the burning sensation in her chest. She had heard variations of this comment every day for the past 3 weeks since arriving at the Special Operations Training Compound. The son of a Taiwanese immigrant mother and an American military contractor father, Sarah had grown up on military bases around the world. Her childhood had been spent moving from one installation to another, always the smallest kid in her class, always having to prove herself in new environments. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 8 years old, starting with a .22 rifle that was almost as tall as she was. "Shooting isn't about size," her father had told her during one of their weekend trips to the range. "It's about patience, precision, and understanding your weapon better than you understand yourself." Those words had stayed with her through high school, where she dominated the shooting team despite coaches initially trying to steer her toward tennis or gymnastics. They followed her through college ROTC, where she consistently outshot her male peers while studying mechanical engineering. And they echoed in her mind now as she prepared for the weekly marksmanship evaluation that could make or break her military career. The truth was that Sarah had never intended to become a sniper. Her original plan had been to serve her required 4 years as an officer after college, then transition into the private sector where her engineering degree would open doors to high-paying defense contractor positions. But during her first deployment to Afghanistan as a second lieutenant, everything changed. Her unit had been conducting routine patrol operations in Helmand Province when they came under fire from Taliban insurgents positioned in the hills overlooking their convoy route. The attack was coordinated and devastating. Within minutes, 3 soldiers were down, and the unit found itself pinned behind their vehicles with no clear line of sight to the enemy positions. Sarah had been riding in the second vehicle, clutching her standard-issue M4 carbine and trying to process the chaos erupting around her. The squad's designated marksmen had been hit in the first volley of gunfire, leaving them without their long-range capability. As bullets continued to rain down from the hillside, Staff Sergeant Williams had made a desperate decision. "Chen, you're the best shot we've got," he had shouted over the gunfire. "Take Martinez's rifle and see if you can spot those shooters." The rifle he handed her was an M110 semi-automatic sniper system, a weapon she had only fired during basic training exercises. But as she settled into position behind a concrete barrier and peered through the scope, something clicked into place. The chaos around her faded away. Her breathing slowed. The crosshairs steadied. Through the magnified optic, she could see muzzle flashes from 3 different positions roughly 800 meters away. The distance was at the extreme edge of her training, but the fundamentals her father had taught her years earlier took over. She calculated for wind drift, elevation, and bullet drop. Then she squeezed the trigger. The first shot took out the machine gunner who had been keeping her squad pinned down. The second eliminated a sniper who had been targeting their medic. The third sent the remaining insurgents retreating deeper into the hills. When the smoke cleared, her unit was able to evacuate their wounded and complete their mission. Word of the incident spread quickly through the base. Within a week, Sarah found herself sitting across from Colonel McKenna, the base commander, who had a reputation for discovering hidden talent among his officers. "Lieutenant Chen," he had said, reviewing her file, "your commanding officer tells me you have a natural gift for precision shooting. Have you ever considered specialized training?" That conversation had led to sniper school, where Sarah had excelled despite constant doubts from her instructors about whether someone of her size could handle the physical demands of the role. She had proven them wrong by graduating second in her class, behind only a former Marine Corps scout who had been shooting competitively since childhood. Now, 2 years later, she found herself at the most elite training facility in the military, surrounded by candidates for the Navy's most prestigious special operations units. The other recruits were products of Ranger School, Marine Force Recon, and Army Special Forces. They were warriors who had proven themselves in combat multiple times over. And then there was Sarah, the engineer turned sniper, who most people assumed had been placed in the program to meet some kind of diversity quota. "Chen, you're up," Rodriguez called out, gesturing toward the firing line. Sarah approached the designated shooting position, a concrete platform that provided an elevated view of the training range. The target array consisted of steel silhouettes at various distances, designed to test both precision and speed. She would have 3 minutes to engage 12 targets ranging from 400 to 1,000 meters. As she settled into position, Sarah noticed that several of the other candidates had gathered to watch. She recognized the look in their eyes, the same expression she had seen countless times before. They were waiting for her to fail, expecting her small frame to be overwhelmed by the recoil of the high-powered rifle or her lack of upper body strength to affect her stability. The range officer raised his hand. "Shooter ready?" Sarah nodded, placing her cheek against the stock of her rifle. The weapon was a custom-built .308 caliber precision rifle, similar to the ones used by military snipers in combat zones around the world. Through the scope, she could see the first target clearly despite the morning mist that had begun to roll across the range. "Begin," the range officer commanded. Sarah's first shot rang out across the training facility. The steel target 400 meters away rang like a bell as the bullet struck center mass. She worked the bolt smoothly, chambering another round as she transitioned to the 500-meter target. Another hit. The rhythm was familiar to her now. Breathe, aim, squeeze, work the bolt, transition. Each movement was economical and precise, no wasted motion or hesitation. By the time she reached the 800-meter targets, a small crowd had gathered behind the firing line. The distant targets required more calculation. Sarah adjusted for the wind that was picking up across the range, a slight breeze from the east that would push her bullets left if she didn't compensate. She could hear murmurs from the watching candidates, but their voices seemed to come from another world. The 900-meter target was partially obscured by a heat mirage, making it difficult to get a clear sight picture. Sarah waited for the shimmer to settle, then fired. Another hit. The final target sat at 1,000 meters, the maximum effective range for the rifle she was using. At that distance, even a slight error in calculation or technique would result in a complete miss. Sarah took extra time with this shot, double-checking her adjustments and waiting for a lull in the wind. The shot felt perfect the moment she pulled the trigger. Even before she could see the impact through her scope, she knew it was a hit. The metallic ring of bullet-striking steel confirmed what she already knew. 12 shots, 12 hits, completed in 2 minutes and 37 seconds. The range fell silent except for the sound of the wind picking up through the nearby trees. Sarah cleared her rifle and stood up from the firing position, keeping her expression neutral despite the satisfaction she felt inside. Rodriguez walked over to check the electronic scoring system that had been tracking each shot. His eyebrows raised slightly as he read the display. Every shot had been within the required scoring ring, with most clustered in the center of each target. "Well," he said, his voice carrying a grudging respect that hadn't been there before. "Looks like we might have underestimated the little lady." The comment stung, even though Sarah knew it was intended as a compliment. She had spent her entire military career fighting against the perception that her success was somehow surprising because of her size. But she had learned long ago that the best response was simply to keep performing. As she walked back toward the equipment shed, Sarah overheard two of the other candidates talking in low voices. "Did you see that shooting?" one of them asked. "That was some serious precision work." "Yeah, but can she carry a wounded teammate out of a hot zone?" the other replied. "Can she kick down doors or handle herself in hand-to-hand combat? Shooting is only part of what we do out there." Sarah pretended not to hear the conversation, but their words echoed in her mind as she cleaned her rifle. They weren't wrong to question whether she could handle the physical demands of special operations work. The shooting was her strength, but the Navy SEALs were tested in ways that went far beyond marksmanship. Over the next several weeks, Sarah threw herself into every aspect of the training program. She pushed her small frame to its limits during physical fitness tests, often finishing last, but always finishing. During combat swimming exercises, she discovered that her low body weight actually provided an advantage in water, allowing her to move with surprising speed and efficiency. The hand-to-hand combat training was more challenging. At barely over 100 pounds, Sarah couldn't rely on brute force to overcome larger opponents. Instead, she studied the techniques obsessively, learning to use leverage and timing to compensate for her size disadvantage. Her background in engineering helped her understand the physics involved in various grappling and striking techniques. But it was during the tactical exercises that Sarah truly began to find her place within the team dynamic. While the other candidates focused on direct assault tactics, Sarah's sniper training had taught her to think differently about battlefield problems. She could spot enemy positions that others missed, identify weak points in defensive structures, and provide overwatch that allowed her teammates to advance safely. The instructors began to take notice. During one particularly complex urban warfare exercise, Sarah's precise shooting had neutralized 3 enemy snipers that had been pinning down her squad. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and make accurate shots in chaotic situations impressed even the most skeptical observers. Captain Peterson, the senior instructor who would ultimately decide which candidates advanced to the next phase of training, called Sarah into his office after a particularly grueling week of exercises. "Chen," he said, gesturing for her to sit down. "I'll be honest with you. When I first saw your file, I had my doubts about whether you belonged in this program." Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her heart rate increased. This conversation could determine whether she continued on the path towards special operations or found herself reassigned to a conventional unit. "But you've shown me something over the past few weeks," Peterson continued. "You've got skills that can't be taught. More importantly, you've got the mindset we're looking for. You don't give up when things get difficult, and you find ways to contribute to the team even when the odds are stacked against you." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied, unsure where the conversation was heading. That said, Peterson's tone became more serious. "You need to understand what you're signing up for. Special operations work isn't about proving points or breaking barriers. It's about completing missions that other people can't handle. Your teammates are going to depend on you, and they're not going to care about your gender or your size when the bullets start flying." "I understand, sir." "Do you?" Peterson leaned forward in his chair. "Because if you graduate from this program, you're going to find yourself in situations where people's lives depend on your ability to perform under pressure. There won't be any participation trophies or second chances." Sarah met his gaze directly. "Sir, I've never asked for special treatment, and I'm not looking for any now. I just want the opportunity to serve alongside the best operators the military has to offer." Peterson studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. But understand that the real test is still coming. The advanced training phase is where we separate the candidates who might make good special operators from the ones who definitely will." As Sarah left Peterson's office, she felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety about what lay ahead. She had proven herself capable in the basic training exercises, but she knew that the advanced phase would push every candidate to their absolute limits. That evening, as she cleaned her gear and prepared for the next day's training, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From a small girl learning to shoot with her father to an officer proving herself in combat, every step had been building toward this moment. The other candidates were beginning to accept her as a legitimate member of the team, though she could still sense some skepticism about her ability to handle the most demanding aspects of special operations work. She didn't blame them for their doubts. The same questions had kept her awake many nights since arriving at the training facility. But Sarah had learned something important during her time in Afghanistan and throughout her military career. Doubt could be a powerful motivator when channeled correctly. Instead of letting uncertainty paralyze her, she used it to drive herself to higher levels of preparation and performance. As she drifted off to sleep in her narrow bunk, Sarah's mind was already focused on the challenges that awaited her in the coming weeks. She knew that the advanced training phase would test not only her physical and mental capabilities, but also her ability to function as part of a team under the most stressful conditions imaginable. The instructors had made it clear that only a small percentage of candidates would ultimately be selected for special operations assignments. Sarah was determined to be among them, not because she had something to prove, but because she genuinely believed she could make a difference in the kinds of missions that regular forces couldn't handle. Outside her window, the rain continued to fall on the training facility, washing away the chalk marks and footprints from another day of preparation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to demonstrate her capabilities, and new chances to earn the respect of her peers and instructors. Sarah Chen had come too far to let anything stop her now. The advanced training phase began with a brutal wake-up call at 0400 hours. Sarah rolled out of her bunk along with the other remaining candidates, her muscles still sore from the previous day's obstacle course. Of the original 42 candidates who had started the program, only 18 remained. The others had been eliminated during the basic training phase, victims of injury, academic failure, or simply the crushing realization that special operations work wasn't for them. The survivors were a hardened group. There was Jackson, a former Army Ranger from Texas whose calm demeanor masked an almost supernatural ability to remain focused under pressure. Morrison came from Marine Force Recon and possessed the kind of physical strength that made difficult tasks look effortless. Williams had been a Navy EOD technician before applying for SEAL training, bringing expertise in explosives and demolitions that had already proven valuable during team exercises. And then there was Sarah, still the smallest member of the group, still fighting to prove that her unconventional path to special operations had prepared her for what lay ahead. Chief Petty Officer Kowalski entered the barracks like a force of nature, his presence immediately commanding attention from every candidate. Unlike the instructors from the basic training phase, Kowalski was a veteran SEAL operator with multiple combat deployments and a reputation for pushing candidates beyond what they thought possible. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice cutting through the early morning silence, "welcome to the part of training where we find out who you really are. Everything you've done up to this point has been preparation. Now we see if you can handle the real deal." The candidates formed up outside the barracks, where they found a collection of equipment that looked more like preparation for an actual military operation than a training exercise. There were tactical vests, communication radios, night vision devices, and enough ammunition to outfit a small army unit. "You'll be conducting a series of mission scenarios over the next 2 weeks," Kowalski explained as the candidates examined the gear. "These scenarios are based on actual operations that SEAL teams have conducted in combat zones around the world. The difference is that when real SEALs screw up, people die. When you screw up, you go home." Sarah picked up one of the tactical vests, surprised by its weight. The body armor alone weighed nearly 30 pounds, not including the additional equipment that would be attached to it. For someone of her size, the gear represented a significant percentage of her total body weight. She noticed Jackson watching her struggle with the vest and expected another comment about her suitability for the program. Instead, he stepped over and helped her adjust the straps so the weight was distributed more evenly across her frame. "The trick is getting the balance right," he said quietly. "Took me forever to figure that out when I first started carrying this stuff." The unexpected assistance reminded Sarah that the dynamics among the remaining candidates had begun to shift. The competitive atmosphere of the early training weeks had given way to something more collaborative. Everyone understood that the final selection would be based on overall performance rather than relative rankings, which meant that helping a teammate succeed didn't diminish their own chances. The first scenario took place in a mock urban environment that the military had constructed to replicate the kind of dense, complex terrain that special operations forces encountered in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. The buildings were realistic enough to include multiple rooms, stairways, and rooftops that provided elevated positions for snipers and spotters. "Your mission," Kowalski briefed the team, "is to locate and eliminate a high-value target who is believed to be meeting with associates in one of these buildings. You have intelligence suggesting the meeting will take place sometime in the next 6 hours, but you don't know the exact time or location." Sarah studied the urban terrain through binoculars, her sniper training automatically identifying potential shooting positions and fields of fire. The scenario was designed to test multiple skills simultaneously: reconnaissance, teamwork, patience, and precision shooting under pressure. The team spent the first hour conducting detailed surveillance of the target area. Sarah positioned herself on a rooftop that provided overwatch for the entire complex while the other team members moved through the buildings below. Her role was to provide early warning of enemy movements and to engage high-priority targets when they presented themselves. Through her rifle scope, Sarah tracked the movement of role-playing instructors who were simulating enemy forces throughout the urban environment. The exercise was designed to be as realistic as possible, with instructors using blank ammunition and smoke grenades to create the chaos and confusion of actual combat. "Chen, you've got movement in Building 3, second floor," Morrison's voice crackled through her radio headset. "Can you get eyes on?" Sarah adjusted her scope and focused on the indicated building. Through a second-story window, she could see two figures moving around what appeared to be a table covered with documents. One of them matched the description of the high-value target they had been briefed to eliminate. "I have positive identification on the HVT," she reported back to the team. "Building 3, second floor, northeast window. He's got at least one associate with him." "Can you take the shot?" Jackson asked from his position near the building's entrance. Sarah calculated the distance at roughly 450 meters, well within her effective range. But the shot would have to be precise. The target was partially concealed by the window frame, and there were innocent role-players in adjacent buildings who could not be harmed during the exercise. "Affirmative," she replied. "I need 30 seconds to get set up properly." Sarah adjusted her breathing and settled deeper into her shooting position. The weight of the tactical gear made it more difficult to achieve the stable platform she was accustomed to, but she had practiced extensively with the equipment during the previous weeks. Through her scope, she could see the target moving around the room, occasionally passing in front of the window where she could get a clear shot. She would need to time her shot perfectly, waiting for the moment when he was fully exposed and stationary. "Chen, we need to move," William's voice came through the radio with unusual urgency. "We've got simulated enemy forces converging on our position. If we don't take this shot in the next 60 seconds, we're going to lose the opportunity." The pressure was exactly what the instructors intended. In real combat situations, snipers rarely had the luxury of unlimited time to set up their shots. They had to perform under stress, with incomplete information, while their teammates' lives hung in the balance. Sarah forced herself to remain calm despite the tension in her teammates' voices. She had learned long ago that rushing a shot was the fastest way to miss completely. Better to take an extra few seconds and make the shot count than to hurry and waste the opportunity entirely. The target appeared in the window again, this time standing still while apparently examining something on the table. Sarah placed her crosshairs on center mass and began her trigger squeeze. The shot felt perfect the moment the round left the barrel. "Target down," she reported, watching through her scope as the role-playing instructor dramatically fell to the floor. "Outstanding shot, Chen." Jackson's voice carried genuine admiration. "Now let's get out of here before those reinforcements arrive." The team extracted from the urban environment without further incident, completing the mission within the prescribed time limit. During the debriefing session, Kowalski praised the team's communication and coordination, while noting areas where their performance could be improved. "Chen," he said, addressing Sarah directly, "that was a textbook sniper shot under pressure. You maintained your composure when the situation got tense, and you delivered exactly what the team needed." The praise felt different from the grudging acknowledgments she had received during the basic training phase. This was recognition from a combat veteran who understood the difference between good shooting and effective sniping in operational conditions. Over the following days, the scenarios became increasingly complex and demanding. The team conducted simulated hostage rescues, reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines, and direct action raids against fortified positions. Each exercise tested different aspects of their training, while requiring seamless coordination among team members. Sarah found her role within the team beginning to solidify. While she still couldn't match the physical strength of some of her teammates, her precision shooting and analytical thinking had become valuable assets that the others relied upon. During planning sessions, they increasingly sought her input on tactical problems that required creative solutions. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging scenario that required the team to assault a compound defended by multiple simulated enemy positions. The target building was surrounded by open ground that would expose any approaching forces to concentrated fire from defensive positions. During the pre-mission planning, The other team members focused on conventional assault tactics that relied on speed and firepower to overwhelm the defenders. But Sarah's engineering background led her to analyze the problem differently. "What if we don't assault the building at all?" she suggested during the planning session. Morrison looked at her with confusion. "What do you mean? The mission is to clear the compound and capture the target." "The mission is to capture the target," Sarah corrected. "But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to fight our way through all the defensive positions to get to him." She spread out a detailed map of the compound that showed the building layouts and defensive positions. "Look at the pattern of the defenses. They're all oriented toward the obvious approach routes. But there's a drainage system that runs underneath the entire compound." Jackson studied the map more carefully. "You're suggesting we go underground?" "I'm suggesting we use the drainage system to get close to the target building without being detected. Then I set up in an overwatch position while you guys breach from an unexpected direction. The defenders will be focused on the tunnels, which gives me clear shots at anyone who tries to reposition." The plan was unorthodox, requiring precise timing and coordination. But it offered the possibility of completing the mission with minimal casualties and maximum tactical surprise. Williams, who had been quiet during the planning discussion, suddenly grinned. "You know what? That's actually brilliant. It's exactly the kind of thinking that separates special operations from conventional forces." The team spent the next 2 hours refining Sarah's concept, working out the details of timing, communication, and contingency plans. By the time they briefed their plan to the instructors, they had developed a comprehensive approach that addressed multiple scenarios and potential complications. The mission itself unfolded almost exactly as Sarah had envisioned. While her teammates moved through the drainage system toward the target building, she established an overwatch position that provided clear fields of fire across the entire compound. When the assault team breached the building through an unexpected entry point, the simulated defenders were caught completely off guard. Sarah's precision shooting eliminated 3 defensive positions before they could reorient to respond to the new threat. The entire operation was completed in under 20 minutes, with the target captured and no simulated casualties among the assault team. Chief Kowalski's debriefing was brief but pointed. "That was the kind of tactical innovation that saves lives in real combat situations. You identified a complex problem and developed a solution that played to your team's strengths while minimizing your exposure to enemy fire." He paused and looked directly at Sarah. "Chen, that plan came from you. Where did you learn to think like that?" "Engineering school, Chief," Sarah replied. "Most problems have more than one solution if you're willing to look at them from different angles." "Well, keep looking at problems from different angles. That kind of thinking is exactly what we need in the teams." As the advanced training phase progressed, Sarah noticed that the questions about her suitability for special operations work had largely disappeared. Her teammates had seen her perform under pressure, contribute meaningfully to mission planning, and deliver precise shooting when it mattered most. She had earned their respect through performance rather than politics. But Sarah also understood that the most challenging test was still ahead. The final phase of training would simulate the kind of high-stress, life-or-death situations that special operations forces faced in actual combat zones. It would require everything she had learned during her military career, plus capabilities she was still developing. The night before the final phase began, Sarah sat on the roof of the barracks, cleaning her rifle and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. In a few days, she would know whether her unconventional path to special operations had been successful or whether she would be reassigned to a conventional unit. Either way, she had already accomplished more than most people had believed possible. She had proven to herself and others that size and gender didn't determine capability in the precision shooting arena. But more importantly, she had discovered that she genuinely belonged among the elite operators who took on the military's most challenging missions. As she finished cleaning her weapon and prepared for another early morning, Sarah reflected on a conversation she'd had with her father during her last leave. He had asked her why she was putting herself through such a demanding program when she could have had a comfortable career as a military engineer. "Because," she had told him, "there are missions out there that require the absolute best people the military can find. If I can be one of those people, then I have an obligation to serve." Now, on the eve of the final selection phase, Sarah remained convinced that she had made the right choice. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. but she was ready for whatever the instructors had planned. The rain had stopped, and stars were visible through the clearing clouds. Sarah took that as a good sign as she headed back inside to get what sleep she could before the final test began. 6 months after graduation from advanced training, Sarah found herself crouched in the back of a military helicopter flying through the darkness over the Persian Gulf. The rhythmic thump of rotor blades provided a steady background noise that had become familiar during her first deployment with SEAL Team 7. Across from her, four of her teammates checked their equipment one final time before what promised to be one of the most dangerous missions of her military career. The intelligence briefing had been sobering. A group of American humanitarian workers had been taken hostage by insurgents operating from a remote compound in a mountainous region near the Iran-Iraq border. Initial rescue attempts by conventional forces had failed, resulting in the capture of 6 additional personnel, including 2 Navy corpsmen who had been providing medical support to the humanitarian team. Now, 12 Americans were being held in a heavily fortified compound that intelligence analysts described as nearly impregnable. The insurgents had chosen their location carefully, positioning themselves in terrain that made conventional assault virtually impossible. The compound sat on a plateau, surrounded by steep cliffs on 3 sides, with the only approach route covered by multiple defensive positions. 5 minutes out, the helicopter's crew chief announced over the internal communication system. Chief Petty Officer Martinez, the team leader, gathered his operators for a final mission review. The plan was complex and risky, requiring precise coordination between multiple elements to succeed. A larger SEAL force would conduct a diversionary assault on the main approach to the compound, while Sarah's 4-person team inserted via helicopter onto an adjacent mountain ridge. "Remember," Martinez said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation, "this isn't a training exercise. These people are counting on us to get them home alive. Chen, you're going to be our eyes and our reach for the entire operation." Sarah nodded, checking her rifle one more time. She was carrying a specialized .300 Winchester Magnum sniper system, a weapon capable of delivering precise fire at distances exceeding 1,000 meters. The rifle had been modified with the latest optical systems and suppressors, allowing her to engage targets with minimal risk of detection. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a narrow ridge that provided an elevated position overlooking the target compound. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah could see the terrorist stronghold approximately 2 kilometers away, its buildings illuminated by floodlights that made it stand out against the surrounding darkness. 30 seconds, the crew chief called out. Sarah's teammates prepared to fast rope from the helicopter onto the rocky terrain below. The insertion would have to be quick and silent to avoid alerting the insurgents to their presence. Once on the ground, they would have approximately 2 hours to establish their overwatch position and begin supporting the main assault. The helicopter hovered 20 feet above the ridge, and the team dropped rapidly onto the landing zone. Sarah hit the ground hard, the weight of her equipment and the uneven terrain making the landing more challenging than she had anticipated. But within seconds, all 4 team members were accounted for and moving toward their designated positions. The team's mission was to provide precision fire support for the main assault, while simultaneously creating escape routes for the hostages. Sarah's role was to eliminate key defensive positions and enemy personnel, who threatened either the rescue force or the captives themselves. As they moved through the rocky terrain toward their overwatch position, Sarah's mind automatically cataloged potential shooting positions and fields of fire. Her engineering background had taught her to think systematically about complex problems, and she applied that same analytical approach to tactical situations. The compound was larger than it had appeared in the aerial photographs, consisting of multiple buildings connected by defensive walls and observation towers. Intelligence reports suggested that the hostages were being held in the central building, but the insurgents had positioned guards and heavy weapons throughout the complex. "Chen, set up on that ridge overlooking the main compound," Martinez ordered, pointing to an elevated position about 800 meters from the target area. "Williams and Jackson will provide security while Morrison and I move closer to establish communications with the main assault force." Sarah made her way to the designated position, carrying her rifle and additional equipment needed to establish a long-term observation post. The ridge provided an excellent view of the entire compound, while offering sufficient concealment to avoid detection by enemy sentries. As she settled into her shooting position, Sarah began the methodical process of range estimation and environmental analysis that had become second nature during her sniper training. The wind was variable, shifting directions as it moved through the mountain passes. The temperature differential between the warm air rising from the compound and the cool mountain air would affect bullet trajectory at longer ranges. Through her rifle scope, she could see movement throughout the compound as insurgents moved between buildings and defensive positions. She counted at least 15 enemy personnel, though intelligence estimates suggested there might be twice that number within the complex. "Overwatch in position," she reported through her radio headset. "I have eyes on the entire compound, counting multiple enemy positions and personnel." "Copy that, Chen," Martinez responded from his position closer to the compound. "Main assault force is 30 minutes out. Begin identifying priority targets." Sarah began the systematic process of cataloging enemy positions and assessing the threat level of each one. The insurgents had positioned machine gun teams in towers that could cover the main approach routes. Snipers occupied elevated positions within the compound itself. Guards with assault rifles patrolled the perimeter and moved between buildings. As she studied the compound, Sarah noticed something that hadn't been evident in the intelligence photographs. There was a pattern to the guards' movements that suggested they were following established patrol routes and timing. If she could map those patterns, it might be possible to create windows of opportunity for the assault force to advance without being detected. "I'm seeing predictable movement patterns among the sentries," she reported to Martinez. "Give me 10 more minutes and I think I can identify gaps in their coverage." For the next several minutes, Sarah tracked the movement of guards throughout the compound, timing their patrol routes and noting periods when certain areas were left unobserved. Her engineering training had included statistical analysis and pattern recognition, skills that proved valuable in tactical situations. "I've got it mapped out," she eventually reported. "There's a 45-second window every 8 minutes when the northeast approach is unguarded. If the assault team can time their movement correctly, they can get within 50 meters of the main building without being detected." "Outstanding work, Chen," Martinez replied. "I'm passing that information to the assault force commander now." As the main assault began, Sarah's role shifted from intelligence gathering to active fire support. Through her scope, she could see the diversionary attack developing on the opposite side of the compound. Explosions and gunfire erupted as the larger SEAL force engaged the insurgents' outer defenses. The diversionary attack was working exactly as planned. Enemy personnel throughout the compound began moving toward the sound of gunfire, leaving other areas temporarily undefended. But Sarah could also see that some of the insurgents were moving toward the building where the hostages were believed to be held. "I've got enemy personnel moving toward the hostage building," she reported with urgency. "Looks like they might be planning to use the captives as human shields." "Take them out," Martinez ordered without hesitation. Sarah's first target was an insurgent, carrying what appeared to be an explosive device toward the hostage building. The shot was challenging due to the distance and the target's movement, but Sarah had trained extensively for exactly this type of precision shooting under pressure. She calculated the lead necessary to intercept the moving target, adjusted for wind drift and elevation, and squeezed the trigger. The insurgent dropped immediately, the explosive device skittering across the compound's central courtyard. Her second target was a sniper in one of the observation towers who had been engaging the main assault force. This shot was more straightforward, a stationary target at a known distance. But the tower was partially illuminated by floodlights, which created challenging optical conditions. Sarah waited for the target to move into a position where the lighting wouldn't interfere with her sight picture, then fired. Another successful engagement that eliminated a threat to the advancing rescue force. "Nice shooting, Chen," William's voice came through her headset. "You just cleared the path for the breach team." Through her scope, Sarah could see the main assault force moving rapidly through the compound, systematically clearing buildings and searching for the hostages. Her continued precision fire eliminated several additional threats, allowing the rescue team to advance more quickly than originally planned. But the most critical moment came when insurgents began moving hostages out of the main building, apparently attempting to relocate them to a more secure position within the compound. Through her scope, Sarah could see American civilians being forced at gunpoint toward a smaller building near the compound's rear wall. "Hostages are being moved," she reported immediately. 4 insurgents escorting what looks like 6 captives toward Building C. The situation was becoming increasingly dangerous. If the insurgents succeeded in moving the hostages to a more secure location, it could complicate the rescue operation significantly. But engaging targets so close to American civilians required extreme precision and careful timing. Martinez's voice came through the radio with clear urgency. "Chen, we need those guards neutralized, but you cannot risk hitting the hostages. Can you make those shots?" Sarah studied the situation through her scope. The insurgents were using the hostages as human shields while moving across open ground. The shots would have to be perfect, precise enough to eliminate the threats while ensuring the safety of the civilians they were protecting. "Affirmative," she replied. "I can make the shots, but I need the hostages to get separation from their guards." "Understood. Stand by." Sarah watched as the rescue team coordinated a diversion that drew some of the insurgents' attention away from the hostages. In that moment of confusion, there was enough separation between captives and captors to allow precision shooting. Her first shot eliminated the lead insurgent before he could react to the diversion. The second target turned toward the sound of gunfire, presenting a clear profile that Sarah engaged immediately. The remaining 2 insurgents attempted to retreat toward the building, but Sarah's rapid follow-up shots eliminated both threats before they could reach cover. "All hostages secure," came the report from the ground force. "Building C is clear and captives are being moved to the extraction point." The rescue operation continued for another 20 minutes, as the assault team systematically cleared the remaining buildings and secured additional personnel who had been held in different locations throughout the compound. Sarah maintained overwatch throughout the operation, engaging targets as they presented themselves while ensuring the safety of both rescue personnel and hostages. When the final count was completed, all 12 American personnel had been successfully rescued without casualties. The precision and coordination of the operation had exceeded even the most optimistic projections from the planning phase. "Outstanding work, everyone," Martinez announced as the team prepared for extraction. "Chen, your shooting tonight saved lives. Those precision engagements allowed us to complete this mission without losing a single hostage or rescue team member." As Sarah packed up her equipment and prepared to move to the extraction point, she reflected on the operation that had just concluded. This was exactly the type of mission she had trained for during her time in special operations training. Complex, dangerous, and requiring the highest levels of skill and precision. But more importantly, it was the kind of mission that justified all the doubts she had overcome and challenges she had endured to reach this point. 12 Americans were going home to their families because a small team of special operations personnel had been able to execute a nearly impossible rescue operation. During the helicopter flight back to base, Sarah's teammates expressed their appreciation for her performance during the mission. But the praise that meant the most came from Chief Martinez during the post-mission debriefing. "Chen," he said after reviewing the operation's success, "when you first joined this team, some people wondered whether someone of your size and background could handle special operations work. Tonight you answered that question definitively." He paused and looked directly at her. "You didn't succeed tonight because you're small or because you're different. You succeeded because you're exactly what this team needed for this mission. Your precision, your tactical thinking, and your ability to perform under pressure made the difference between success and failure." Sarah nodded, accepting the praise while understanding that this mission was just one step in her continuing development as a special operations warrior. There would be other missions, other challenges, and other opportunities to prove herself. But for tonight, she was satisfied knowing that her unconventional journey to special operations had prepared her to make a meaningful contribution when it mattered most. The girl who had been told she was too little had just demonstrated that effectiveness in combat had nothing to do with physical size and everything to do with skill, determination, and the willingness to rise to the occasion when lives hung in the balance. As the helicopter carried the rescue team back to base, Sarah cleaned her rifle one more time and prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had found her place among the military's elite operators, not by conforming to anyone else's expectations, but by developing her unique capabilities to their fullest potential and applying them where they could do the most good. The mission was complete, but Sarah Chen's story as a special operations sniper was just beginning.